technically live on YouTube, so I'm going to record now.
All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Montana Book Festival's virtual events. I'm Lauren Korn. I'm the director of the Montana Book Festival, and I'm here to welcome Elizabeth Jonkel and the Montana Book Award, as well as all of the 2019 Montana Book Award authors. So with that, I'm just going to throw it over to Elizabeth.
All right. Well, welcome, and thank you for joining me for the 2019 Montana Book Awards ceremony. My name is Elizabeth Jonkel, and I am the chair of the Montana Book Awards. This ceremony would normally have taken place at the beginning of the year as part of the Montana Library Association's annual conference, but due to circumstances we're all aware of, the Montana Festival of the Book has kindly offered us a venue for this event through their virtual festival. So thank you to the Montana Book Festival. Thank you for that. So first, a bit of background. The Montana Book Award came to existence in 2001 when the Friends of Montana or Missoula Public Library recognized that Montana is home to a large number of astounding writers. They decided that Montana needed a book award in order to recognize the state's literary and artistic excellence and honor some of them each year, so as to bring attention to their work and their craft, to attract readers, and to promote great literature. Every year since, for the last 19 years, the Montana Book Award has bestowed its annual award and honor awards in recognition of outstanding Montana publications. Conditions for nomination can be found on the Montana Book Award website, and anyone is invited to submit a nomination for consideration to the committee. Once nominations are received, a hardworking and dedicated committee of readers representing geographic distribution throughout Montana reads the works so as to select the winners. This year's committee members were Amanda Allpress of Missoula, Gloria Beam of Chester, Marge Doyle of Missoula, Della Dube of Helena, Hannah Munt of Bozeman, Mary Drew Powers of Whitefish, Kim Seamson of Glendive, Debbie Stewart of Great Falls, and Gavin Wolcher of Billings. As nominations are received throughout the year, committee members read in preparation for an end-of-year selection meeting. Their lively discussion and debate results in selection of a winner. Because of the high quality of the year's nominees, we also selected 4 honor books. Today, I am making a formal announcement about each winner, and we are lucky to have the authors with us here to receive their awards. We will hear from each author as the announcement is made. I will start with our 4 honor books. So the award for each honor book is a framed woodcut of the Montana Book Award logo, which was printed and designed by artist Claire Emery. Each framed woodcut has a placard indicating the author, the award-winning title, and the year of receipt. So in no particular order, we will start with Grain by Grain, A Quest to Revive Ancient Wheat, Rural Jobs, and Healthy Food by Bob Quinn and Liz Carlisle and published by Island Press. Committee member Marge Doyle offered the following explanation as to why Grain by Grain was one of her top choices for the Montana Book Award. Each year in the Montana Book Awards, there are 1 or 2 titles that I label as life changers. In my opinion, Grain by Grain falls into this category. It is a well-reasoned book about farming and its impact on our world, our health, and our economy. The book tells the story of Bob Quinn's journey that takes him through college, back to the family farm in Big Sandy, and into the world of organic farming, renewable energy, and community sustainability. There are so many important points that are well explained, well researched, and well documented that it must truly be said, read the book. This is documentation in a very readable form that sounds a warning about how big ag corporations are not making a food supply that will feed and nourish us and the world, but rather are devaluing the food and creating more hunger in the world through pollution of natural resources with fertilizers and pesticides, and through the cheap food that has not only less nutritional value, but is actually working against our bodies and creating illness, which then puts more money in the pockets of big pharma corporations. Marge's favorite quote from Grain by Grain was, "The real measures of economic health are in the fundamental goods that not only make our lives possible, but also make them worth living. Thriving communities, meaningful work, healthy land." So please, I'm going to have my husband, he's going to hold up the award so you can see what it looks like. But I'd like everybody to join me in congratulating Bob Quinn and Liz Carlisle as they accept this honor as part of the 2019 Montana Book Awards. So now, Bob and Liz, if you have anything you'd like to say, you may.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you. That's a great honor and a big surprise, and like the cherry on the cake for us, really. It's we had a great year of touring the country, Liz and I together, mostly until she had to go back to work. She has a real job, you see. And I was able to continue on, and she joined me from time to time through the winter. And our last event was the only one canceled. It was the very beginning of this year in March. And we're very, very thankful that we were able to finish our tour before everything closed down. This was a dream really come true for me for many years of thinking and effort to try to write a book. I've never written a book before. I've written scientific papers. My background is science and plants, and as well as being an organic farmer. And after I spent 5 years on it, I had something about half written that my favorite publisher said, well, it sounded a little bit more like a scientific paper. And it was a little discouraging. I was rejected. So I put the manuscript on a shelf, and about a year later, I bumped into Liz, who I had previously met in while she was writing her book, Lennon Underground. And boy, I thought, wow, if I could talk Liz into helping me, then I could reach the end of the road that I was trying to hold there. And so we had a little discussion, and she thought about it and called me back and says, I'm in. And so we started, and she did in 5 months what I couldn't do in 5 years. That's what training and talent in the book writing world will do for you. And I was thrilled with being a partner with her in this book. And we've had a great time promoting it, and we had a great time writing it. It wasn't without a lot of effort and a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun. And I just want to, again, thank Liz for having trust in me and faith in me to join up with her talent with some of my ideas. And of course, a lot of them were the same as what she was thinking. And we came out with something that both of us are very, very happy with, and glad that we've had such a good response from, actually.
Well, and I just want to say it's been such an honor to be part of this project. You know, I think Bob is a great Montanan, and his is a great Montana story. And there's just such promise in the way his path to economic revitalization for a rural community. And I think this story is so timely, really for our whole country, as well as for Montanans, to think about how, you know, sustainable agriculture and renewable energy offer such a bright future for rural places that often feel kind of left behind, you know, with the economic direction that we've taken. But it's also just such a huge honor and pleasure to be part of this Montana literary community. And as kind of a fun note, when Bob and I actually had this conversation about doing a book together, it was at a farm tour that was actually organized by one of the other honor book award winners today, Corrie Williamson. So it just goes to show you that, you know, the Montana literary community, we really are a team effort, sharing ideas and visions for the future.
Thanks, Corrie. Good job. We really appreciate all of the effort that you guys have put into this, and bringing such a great group together. I wanted to have a way to give my message, and the story of my life was the vehicle by which we philosophized. And Liz was a champion putting that together. I wanted to really beat the bushes and get on the stump and really preach what I've come to realize is our best hope for the future. And that's regenerative organic agriculture, good food, and good living and a clean planet and a prosperous rural communities. And yet I didn't feel I could just go out and just stump that without the background. And the background that Liz helped me put together was actually the life I've lived and the people I have met and the associations that I've become a part of. And so that's what we tried to do. And as a team, I think that we accomplished our goal. And that's what I was happy about. And that's what I'm thankful for. So thank you again very much.
Well, because there were two co-authors, I have 2 woodcuts for each of you.
Oh, great. I wonder how we're going to split that.
You don't have to share. You don't have to share.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we'll move on to the second one then. So our second honor title is Ernest Hemingway in the Yellowstone High Country by Chris Warren and published by Riverbend Publishing. So committee member Della Dube had this to say about this publication. Hemingway, one of the most notable and intriguing American authors, has been the subject of many biographies. But Chris Warren doesn't give us a comprehensive biography. What he gives us is an intimate portrait of Hemingway's life, using his close friends and family during one of the most important periods of his life and during one of his most productive years as an author. The focus of the book is the summers he spent at the Elbar Tea Ranch outside Cook City from 1930 to 1938. Chris Warren interviewed many people in and around Cook City, completed extensive research in a variety of libraries, and was able to fill a gap in scholarship, Hemingway's time in the Yellowstone High Country. The reader is given a map of the area, a description of the major players in Hemingway's life on the Elbar Tea Ranch, visitors to the ranch, and the important role that hunting and fishing played in his life with friends, his 3 sons, and wife Pauline. Many of his best works were influenced by and or written at the Elbar Tea. During this time from 1930 to 1938 in the high country, Hemingway was able to briefly let go of the looming influence of his father's suicide, symbolized by throwing the gun his father used, sent to him by his mother, in the lake. Sadly, in 1939, he quit going to the Elbar Tea, left his wife Pauline when she needed him most, and lost the close connection he had with his sons. In these 168 pages, through careful research, photography selection, and concise formatting, we see an unusually content and productive Hemingway at peace with himself. This book is truly a pleasure to read, and certainly one of my favorite nominees this year. Chris is very deserving of this Honor Book Award. So I can hold up the woodcut for you if you'd like. It's
bring it.
Yeah. I'll show, maybe we could get a little close up on the placard itself. Just okay. So if you'd all please join me in congratulating Chris Warren as he accepts this honor as part of the 2019 Montana Book Awards.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Hello to everybody at home and everybody on the panel here. Thank you to Elizabeth and everyone at the Montana Book Awards. Congratulations to Corrie, Bryce, Bob and Liz, and to this year's winner, John Taliaferro. I'm just going to discuss kind of my experience with writing my first book also. My dive into Hemingway's time in Yellowstone country started when an old friend from Red Lodge named Walkin' Tom Weaver stopped into my coffee shop in Cook City and gave me a copy of True at First Light, a nonfiction account of Hemingway's second trip to Africa. Tom had dog-eared a couple of pages where, a couple of pages where Cook City was mentioned. And since winters are notoriously long in Cook City, I decided to tug on this thread and having no idea where it would eventually lead me. First, there was a reading of the biographies and the books and the letters. Then there was the mining of local sources, histories of Cook City, his historic general store, the surrounding ranches. I interviewed a lot of elderly locals whose mothers and fathers had known Hemingway in the 30s. And next was separating rumor from fact and searching for a publisher when what I needed was an editor. But it wasn't long before I realized that I'd found a hole in Hemingway scholarship. The remoteness of the region outside Yellowstone's northeast entrance had kept the world of Hemingway scholarship at bay. And it was this remoteness that attracted Hemingway and also myself to this region in the first place. My book became as much about the place and its inhabitants as it was about Hemingway. Truth be told, I'd never been a big fan. While I was intrigued by the iceberg theory, wherein 1/8 of the story is kind of on the page and 7/8 lay below the surface for the reader to kind of find for themselves, I was always put off by the machismo and the bravado that I associated with Hemingway. As I read through all the work, though, I discovered a very different version of the pop culture caricature that I thought him to be. He was dressed as a girl until he was 7. He skipped college to volunteer as an ambulance driver in World War I, suffered 217 shrapnel wounds to his lower half. He chose lesbian lovers Gertrude Stein and Alice Toklas to be the godparents of his first child. And his father killed himself right before his first trip out west. He was a fierce anti-fascist and was about as far left politically as you could be in America without being arrested. In short, he was a lot more interesting and complicated than I thought. And by the end of this project, I had become taken by his bravery, but not the type of bravery that you find on a battlefield or in a boxing ring, but the kind of bravery that drives an author to write truthfully about the most painful things in his or her life. After completing my first draft, I want to share of the Hemingway Society's Founders Fellowship and use the money to travel to the JFK Library in Boston and to the Firestone Library in Princeton to gather pictures. The fellowship had got me some attention from a couple of scholars, and they came out to visit me in Cook City and convinced me to share all this with the Hemingway Society. And the Society had their International Hemingway Conferences every 2 years. 2018 was scheduled for Paris, and then 2020 was scheduled for Cuba. But after the 2016 election, they scrapped their plans for Cuba and sent out an emergency call for site proposals. So I was still trying to finish the book and raise 2 kids and work full time. I decided I couldn't pass this opportunity up. If I could lure an international Hemingway conference that had previously been held in places like Chicago and Paris and Madrid to Cook City, Montana, it would not only serve my community for years to come, it also provide priceless marketing for my first book. At the suggestion of the Society, I joined forces with the folks in Sheridan, Wyoming, submitted a 29-page proposal to bring the 2020 International Hemingway Conference to Wyoming and Montana. After raising money with a GoFundMe campaign, I headed to Paris to support the proposal and present a paper establishing Cook City as the setting of Hemingway's final published work. On the first morning of the conference, at an event in the middle section of the Eiffel Tower, I was pulled aside by Joe Flora, the president of the Hemingway Society, and told that the 2020 conference was coming to Montana. The tugging of that thread in a Cook City coffee shop had taken me on the adventure of a lifetime. I had met literary heroes such as Doug Peacock and Tom McGuane, as well as Patrick and Valerie Hemingway. I'd been introduced to the humanities-based communities of Livingston, Red Lodge, Billings, and Sheridan, traveled all around Montana and to New York and Key West and Paris to hobnob with the Hemingway Society. And this experience revealed the value of humanities to Montana communities and their visitors, and introduced me to the characters and organizations whose intellectual curiosity and generosity and hard work enrich the lives of Montanans every day. Even with the crushing disappointment of having the 2020 conference canceled due to COVID-19, I wouldn't change a thing about the experience. The conference has been rescheduled for July 2021, and hopefully this delay will provide an opportunity for the humanities communities of Montana and Wyoming to contribute. I would like to thank all the people that helped me along in this endeavor, and once again, thank the Montana Book Awards for this tremendous honor, and congratulate all the other winners. And thank you once again, everybody, and hopefully we'll see everybody in Cook City next summer.
And do you reside here still in Cook City, Chris?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth from Portland just because my kids have outgrown the school here. We only go up to 8th grade. But yeah, I've been here 27 years.
Okay.
So that's.
Well, I'll try to use my library connections in Montana to get your award to Cook City.
Yeah, I'll be through Missoula in, I don't know, end of October or something.
Okay, well, we'll get it to you. We'll put
Or
it in
you
your
can come see me.
hands.
Thank you, everybody, and congratulations.
All right. And now we'll do The River Where You Forgot My Name by Corrie Williamson, published by Southern Illinois University Press. So committee member Gavin Woltier had this to say about Corrie's book of poetry. In a seamless blending of history and speculation, poet Corrie Williamson creates a landscape for the mind, populated with many wonders and ideas. With accessible language and vivid images, the poems in this collection resonate with the reader long after they've concluded their reading. As a recent transplant to Montana, these poems gave me a better understanding of some of the issues unique to Montana, both the good and the bad, and raised my cultural awareness of who we are as Montanans. So if I could get the award for Corrie, I'd like everybody to join me in congratulating her as she receives this award from the Montana Book Awards for 2019.
Thank you. Those are so beautiful. I can't wait to have that in my hands. That is the nicest blurb. That's really lovely. And just, I'm really honored by that and by being among these incredible writers. And I'm so happy to see you all and interact with you this way. I am 5 months into what for me will be a 7.5-month wilderness writing residency. And most of the time I live in a tiny off-the-grid cabin along the wild and scenic portion of southwestern Oregon's Rogue River. And I have no Wi-Fi and I have no cell service and I'm 2 hours from town. And I know you guys are all totally exhausted by Zoom webinars, but this is my first one. So for me, this is lovely to see human faces because I usually only see people who are rafting by me on the river and are totally confused by me and my old dog and my day pack and have no idea how I've materialized along the banks of the Rogue. And so I'm up here this weekend in my mother-in-law's basement at the moment in Portland, flicking light switches for the thrill of it and doing this with you all. And it's so delightful. One thing I wanted to say is that as soon as the news came out and I got the email from Elizabeth with the list of finalists and the winners, I was reading through it and went on to either read parts of or read about all of the books. And it became very clear to me that all of these books are in some way or another, various manners, about our relationship to the land and to this wild world that we live in and the flora and fauna that we share it with. And I think that each of these books has something to teach us or to tell us about the ways that we change the land and the ways it changes us. The ways we steward it or fail to. And I think that whether it was intentional or not on the part of the committee to select books that share that in common, I think it's wonderful that that's what happened and that is timely and urgent. And I am really happy to have my book among those because I do think it's an effort to challenge some of the narratives that we have and that we tell about how we use or own the land and our history on it. So I'm really grateful to be recognized for that. And I'm going to read some poems. I think I'm just going to read 3 poems. And I picked 3 that feel sort of relevant to this group. And I'm going to start with one that is inspired by Yellowstone and the creatures of Yellowstone. And I will just sort of put in context a reference in this poem to something that didn't quite happen. But when I was writing this, Montana, well, I guess Idaho and Wyoming were planning to hunt grizzly bears in the Yellowstone ecosystem because in 2016, the Yellowstone grizzly lost its status as threatened and was viewed as recovered. And so management of the grizzly returned to the states. And Wyoming and Idaho had set a quota and were beginning to issue permits to hunt grizzlies. Montana was going to wait a year and kind of sit the first hunt out. And then a federal judge overturned the decision to remove the threatened status. And so the hunt didn't happen and the grizzly bears are still protected for now. But when I was writing this, the hunt was planned and it was going to happen. And so the name of the poem is called The Pleasuring Ground, or This Week in Animal News. And the pleasuring ground is a reference to the charter language from Yellowstone, which set aside the park as a pleasuring ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. The poem has a long epigraph at the beginning too, just so you know. The pleasuring ground, or this week in animal news. The number of D suffixes used at the end of the call denotes the size of the threat. The more Ds, the bigger the threat. So if you hear the call chickadee, D, that means a smaller threat than if you hear chickadee, D, D, D. Of course, the threat level is from the perspective of a chickadee. In Rajasthan, a camel chews the head off its owner after standing tied all day in the sun. A gorilla is shot with its huge cartographic hand encircling a human child's forearm. A bison calf washes down the Madison, is stuffed shivering in the trunk of a tourist's sedan and euthanized when its herd does not accept its escape from loss. I find a note I've written myself. Albatross, 3 hinged wings, multiple mothers. Lovely, but I've forgotten where I was headed with it. The black-capped chickadee has one of the most advanced non-human language systems on Earth. Their song can say, I hop on the ground, or I fear from this branch, denote a threat in the air or from below, and summon their fellows to mob. In the original language of our nation's first park and its second chance wolves, the land we share is dubbed a pleasuring ground. This year, we will shoot grizzly bears for sport. The judge in the New York Times article condemning the de-endangerment of the wolverine calls the beast cryptic, old word for occult, for mysticism worthy of concealing, term for the wishes of the dead, the tomb where we bury alive the ebbing babble of the wild. The next poem I'm going to read is about farmers, and it's so great to be on here with my friends Liz and Bob. And Liz, when you said that, I had this memory of the Little Underground tours and Bob walking out of this big green field of kamut and saying, "Me and Liz are going to write a book together." But I hadn't thought subsequently that of course that's sort of part of where that magic happened. So that is just fabulous. And I organized that, or was part of the group organizing that farm tour when I worked for a small nonprofit, but wonderful nonprofit here in Montana called Arrow. For several years, I was their outreach director. And as part of that job, I used to go and attend every year the Montana Farmers Union's Women's Conference. So not the Farmers Union's Conference, but the Farmers Union's Women's Conference, which was like women farmers and the wives of farmers. And it was always this like wonderful, weird mix of like, here's how to slaughter a goat, and like, here's how you organize your community through potlucks for social and political change, and here's how to arrange flowers, and here's how to felt wool, and like, maybe that's radical too, and I don't know. And it always amazed me, the kind of power and wisdom of these women. So this poem is inspired by that, and it's called At the Farmers Union's Women's Conference in Paradise, Montana. The herbalist has hair like a red horsetail, and I have had too little coffee to stomach some of the Gaia woo-woo, but I am trying to listen when she speaks about magpies nesting in the brambling hawthorn. She is saying St. John's wort is community, is the sun, is my mother, and she actually uses the words maiden and crone to describe her audience, and tells us that yarrow root will stop bleeding but start menstrual flows, and all I can think is that yarrow must be an old word indeed, and weaves together yesterday and tomorrow, used by Achilles on the battlefields of Troy to sop his brother's rosy wounds, while on she goes, this skinny oracle, her lilt a quiet one, but I peg her for a native when she says, measure, the long open-mouthed melodic may of the first syllable, catching me again as it did the first time I heard the lentil farmer use it to describe the wealth of dirt, and knew something in the tone had traveled from a white and green country of ice to live here like a castaway whose black ship sails a sea of grass, telling me how to measure the tincture, the root, the loess, while outside snow is falling on the earthly garden and my brain stumbles with white flowers and wanting to say, oh sisters, oh city keepers, yellow sparrows. And I'm just going to read one more, and it's a short one. And a number of the poems in this book are written in the voice that I have imagined through research and speculation for a real live woman named Julia Hancock, who when she was 16 was married off to William Clark after he and Lewis had returned from the expedition to the West. And she moved to St. Louis with him and lived out the rest of her short life there. But she grew up in the same little town in Virginia that I did. And so I worked to kind of explore ideas about progress and technology in the West through her voice 200 years before mine. But this poem is actually set in Virginia in 1804. And a lot of people, even on the East Coast, don't know a story that's really important to me about the American chestnut, which is a tree that used to make up 1 in every 4 hardwood trees on the Eastern seaboard. And they say that a squirrel could travel from Georgia to Maine in the boughs of a chestnut tree and never touch the ground. And the chestnut blight arrived in the early 20th century from chestnuts imported from Asia and just destroyed the chestnut forests, just every last one. Billions and billions of trees just wrecked by this fungal blight and changed the ecosystems and the economies, rural economies, all through the East. And there's a few left. I used to go looking for these old chestnut giants or their stumps in the Blue Ridge Parkway with my father when I was a kid. And I think that the lesson in the story of the chestnut is really important and one I don't think we should forget. And so the poem is written in the voice of Julia Hancock in 1804, when she would have been walking through chestnut forests and could never have imagined a world without chestnuts. But of course, time makes possible many things that seem impossible. So this is called Chestnut Sabbath, Fincastle, Virginia, 1804. What clamored squall in startling a tom turkey back to Chestnut's shelter from his worm shucking in the dawn-wet fields? Ritual of snaring and snipping from their lives the little soil eaters, pulled up like thread from the earth's stormy needlepoint canvas to keep from drowning. He squabbles in shade now, hunts leaf litter, and de-armors the chestnuts beneath their mother trees, watchkeepers aged and aging in their uninterrupted dominion. Time is its own form of idle malady, which stirs, brews, fruits, or readies its black powder beyond our knowing. All things abide here between summon and pluck. Thank you all so much, and congratulations to everybody.
Thank you, Corrie. Well, we'll move to our 4th and final honor winner, which is Down from the Mountain, The Life and Death of a Grizzly Bear by Bryce Andrews, published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. So committee member Hannah Munt said this book captures the values and thoughtfulness of what it means for many people who live in Montana. Andrews tells the story of how over the summer of 2017, he planned and built an electrified fence to keep grizzly bears out of a cornfield near the Mission Mountains. Informed by his own personal experience, this memoir is fresh and honest and portrays a deep love and concern for finding a way to live respectfully with wildlife right at our doorstep. Andrews weaves his own story alongside that of Millie's, a mother bear who is trying to adapt to the changes happening to an area where bears have foraged and wandered for years and years. Our committee chose it as an honor book for its topical relevance to issues many Montanans prioritize: wild conservation and land management. It is beautifully written and creates a narrative that balances human life alongside wildlife. So here is your placard, Bryce.
Hey, wonderful.
So I'd like everybody to join me in congratulating Bryce as he accepts this honor as part of the 2019 Montana Book Awards.
Well, thank you, everybody. This is an honor. This is a wonderful thing, and I would kind of echo what Corrie said. It's just really nice to be able to, see some people, because during the summer I am also not much of a literary man. I have a life of pieces like so many people do in Montana, and in the summer I'm really busy on our farm up here in the Jonkel Valley, and also doing field work along the lines of what led to Down from the Mountain. But I just wanted to say it was a really interesting experience that led to the book. I was working up in the Mission Valley for a nonprofit group called People and Carnivores, and gotten sort of dragged into this situation where I ended up with this amazing sort of front row seat to the ways in which the wild world and the domesticated world are colliding in the modern landscape. So what I wanted to do is just read a couple pages and then talk a little bit more about the book. And so since we're here in August, in the sort of hot season, I chose a little chunk that's sort of germane to this time of year. So in the Mission Valley, August raced ahead without me. Chokecherries ripened, blackening on limbs beside ditches, streams, and reservoirs, flourishing in the shelter belts of abandoned houses. Birds chattered in the leaves. Bears visited the fruit trees at night and ate standing up, raking with claws, pulling branches through their mouths, swallowing pits and all, resting bloated until they could resume the feast. Plums swelled and softened. The grizzlies knocked hot-fleshed fruit to the ground. They sucked hard at the teats of summer, eating until their guts succumbed. Apples ripened everywhere. Bitterroot Macintoshes on leggy, untended trees, prized Honeycrisps in orchards, crab apples on the banks of creeks and sloughs, and the feast became frenzy. The grizzlies fed in a series of massive inhalations, taking food the way a skin diver breathes before ducking beneath the waves. This was the rule of August. During the day, the valley belonged to humans. Tractors worked the field and children played carefree in the yards. People swam in shady eddies and picnicked beside the creeks. Life, even at the edge of the woods, went on as if ravenous creatures were not hiding among the trees. But at night, the bears came out. With twilight's coming, bears stirred in well-hidden daybeds. Stretching in the cooling evening, they made sorties from Millie's woods and other sheltered places. The valley belonged to them after dusk, and people shut their doors. Yard lights spread yellow circles on the ground, and farm dogs patrolled the edges, barking into the dark. The valley floor may be perilously full of humans, but it's lavishly stocked with food. Grizzlies eat a lot of domesticated fruit in the Mission Valley, more than in any other part of Montana. They've been making use of orchards for a century, and their scats have spread seeds across the landscape, raising countless feral trees. The bears that came down in August knew every corner and fold of the land, each tree an unfenced garden. They were careful, if not afraid. Though they went nightly among houses, they were very seldom seen. The sow named Millie taught her daughters how to forage in this risky cornucopia. The little bears were compact, pretty creatures. Only a few months old and full of restless energy, the cubs aped their mother's movements. When she dug in the dirt, they dug too. When she paused mid-stride to scent the wind or listen, they stood still. Coming down from Millie's woods, they passed near enough to the Shock Dairy's dead pit to sniff at bones. Crossing Hillside Road, Millie and her cubs saw headlights coming, heard rising engine noise, and loped away through the alfalfa growing north of the cornfield. Avoiding houses, they made nocturnal rounds of places that she knew well. Visiting familiar trees, Millie kept far from lights. Though the cubs had grown, she guarded them jealously against the world. Roaming the valley for more than a decade had steeped her in caution. She became, as all grizzlies do at night, a heavy, smooth-walking shadow. She was a faint noise from without, a suspicion in the minds of men and women peering from doorways. She was efficient, hungry, and surprisingly discreet for an animal of almost 500 pounds. the cubs understood enough to eat the way their mother did. Gorging themselves sick, they rested and began again. A swaddling of fat grew under their skin, and their hair showed glossy in the moon's white light. So I guess one of the things that really strikes me about the animal stories and the world with which I became entangled in the course of this book is the amazing degree to which grizzlies try to share the landscape with us, and the astounding degree to which we have changed a landscape that's absolutely essential to them to survive. So this book is largely about the story of one bear, Millie, who's born in the missions, which are just out my window here. You guys can't quite see them even if I turn the computer around, but they are here. She was born in the mountains into a landscape that looks very much like it has for thousands of years. But when she came of age, she came down into a valley floor that's full of crops. You know, people are growing corn, they're raising chickens, they're raising fruit. It's a very domesticated landscape. And so the book follows her story, and it follows the way in which this proximity, the fact that she's attracted to this corn crop, eventually leads to her demise. And I hope that that simple, simple, clear story functions as a lens through which we can look at our modern landscape, and functions as a door that can open toward questions about what we're going to do here and how we can and will share this place with the animals that make it whole. Because I'm here to tell you, I mean, there are two types of mountains. There are mountains that still have grizzlies in them, and there are ones that have lost them. And they feel substantially different when you move through them, which is something I do a lot just for fun and for work. So I wanted to write a book that told a simple story, but that opened onto larger questions about the way this landscape is changing as it becomes more crowded, as climate change changes the way that we can grow crops and what crops we can grow, and what the future looks like in a part of the world that so many people regard as sacred or even infinite, but which is in fact, you know, our daily lived reality as people who live in this region, and is anything but infinite, a place that's becoming more and more crowded as we go on. So anyway, I'm really glad to get a chance to talk with you all, and I'm so pleased and grateful that the committee chose to share my book with folks in this way. So thank you very much.
Well, and I understand you also received an honor from the University of Montana this year too. Is your book not picked up as a freshman read? Is that something like that?
That's true. It's the Grizz Read, and I guess that's what I get for putting one right on the cover. I'm also going to be the Kittredge visiting writer in the spring. So this is my U of M academic year, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, congratulations. Yeah. And I'll have to buy a copy of this book for my brother, because he's the large predator manager for District 4 here in the western side of the state. And I think he'd probably be interested in reading your book. So.
If we're talking about Jamie, he's kind of a legend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if he owns it or not yet, but I'll make sure he gets a copy.
If you don't, I will.
Okay. So now we get to our award winner for the 2019 Montana Book Awards, Grinnell, America's Environmental Pioneer and His Restless Drive to Save the West by John Taliaferro and published by Live Right Publishing. So about this title, committee member Gavin Wolcher said, "A great biography is able to marry the microcosm of a person's life with the macrocosm of what that person's life meant in the larger context of society. In my experience, few biographies truly convey this level of storytelling. Grinnell is the rare exception. John Taliaferro not only explores the life of George Bird Grinnell, he also explores the larger issues of the time and details aspects of intellectual history, conservation, race relations, politics, indigenous culture, and natural history. A thorough and expansive biography, Grinnell was a remarkable read that held me captive throughout the narrative. At over 600 pages, this is a time-consuming read, but worth every minute." And Marge Doyle said, "This biography of the man whose name is familiar to most in Montana is extensive, well documented, and gives the reader a real appreciation of all that was accomplished by this early ethnologist, paleontologist, conservationist, and champion of many native tribes in the nation. Grinnell was one of the founders of the Audubon Society, Field and Stream, championed the national park system, in many ways responsible for Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks, as was responsible for the passage of much legislation that protects parks, wildlife, and clean water. A person of this depth and importance to the area needs to be known for more than an almost non-existent glacier." So each year, the author of the book selected for the Montana Book Award receives a piece of artwork created by a Montana visual artist. Mara Panich-Crouch of the independent bookstore in Missoula, Fact and Fiction, takes the lead in recommending, selecting, and sponsoring the artwork selected as the grand prize. So I'm going to let Brad come over here because it's pretty big. He'll hold it up. So this year, sorry about the reflections, but this year we present to John Taliaferro, Winona and the Big Oil Wendigo by native artist Jason Clark. To quote the artist, "This print deals with the legend of the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a creature of the Algonquian people's culture, imagination, and experience. It is the personification of both the physical and spiritual starvation. In appearance, the Wendigo is described as being so thin that its dried skin is pulled tightly over its skeletal frame. It represents not only the worst that one human could do to another, but also greed, selfishness, gluttony, and excess." So we'll get that to you, John. So John is here, of course, to accept the award virtually. So please join me in congratulating him wholeheartedly for his amazing and wonderful contribution to Montana literature.
I love the art. That's beautiful. Thank you. It'll go on my wall behind me. You see that print is a George Catlin print that hung in my great-great-grandparents' parlor in Baltimore in the late 1800s. So you can, it's going to have welcome company. It's a terrific honor to win this prize, and it's great to be with all of you. I wish we could be together in person. It's great to be selected and included with what's a sterling cohort here, but also to be to join the great cavalcade of Montana writers and literature. It means the world to me. And to win this award also means that maybe I've done a George Bird Grinnell justice, that my claim that he was worthy of a full biography is proven, and that readers think that I did a worthy job. Often I think that when I talk about Grinnell that I'm in a book club, but I'm the only person who's read the book. Because he is sort of a overlooked or forgotten figure. And as Corrie Williamson said, and then Bryce echoed, all of the books here today under discussion are books about the land. My book certainly is, but they're also about something else. It's about an overlooked or forgotten piece of the Montana story. And that's where Grinnell comes in. I first heard of George Bird Grinnell 30 years ago when I was writing my first book, a biography of Charles M. Russell. Russell had a cabin on Lake McDonald, and Grinnell was a yearly visitor to Glacier Park. And in fact, it was Grinnell who almost single-handedly made a national park out of Glacier. So Russell and Grinnell knew each other. Then I kept stumbling upon Grinnell again. I wrote a book about the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore. And so I came upon Grinnell's diaries when he rode through the Black Hills with Custer in 1874. I wrote a book about Alaska in 1899, and Grinnell was one of the scientists on the Great Harriman Gilded Age expedition there. And I thought, well, who is this guy? And when I began writing this book, or contemplating writing this book, I thought I was going to write a book about an Eastern dude who was getting one final romantic, sentimental squeeze out of the Wild West, you know, something I myself had wanted to do, maybe the rest of us. You know, Grinnell was, in the 1870s, when he came to Montana, arriving at Fort Benton and riding overland down to Yellowstone, he was looking for what? The last best place back then. And he continued to come back every year, specifically to Montana. It almost became a ritual to him. He lived in New York. He was raised on the estate formerly owned by John James Audubon. So he was very much imbued with the spirit and wanderlust of Audubon. And he came to Montana in 1874, as I said, and then he kept coming back for the next 50 years. And he immediately saw what was going on around him as he came across the West. And there was a sort of a cascade of evolution and extinction. Darwin had written The Origin of the Species 10 years before. The Transcontinental Railroad was now complete across the country. So you could come west and apply the knowledge that he had in the East to the West. And he saw this extinction. Immediately, the bison were disappearing. And then, of course, the next great endangerment was to the Native Americans. Grinnell picked up on all of that. He understood by visiting the Black Hills and then Yellowstone that national parks were, we didn't know what a national park was going to be. Grinnell was part of the conversation of what a national park should be, not just a pleasuring ground, but nature reserves where endangered species could regenerate. And he took that message, and when he would go back east, he would take it to people of influence. He had great connections in New York through his publication, his Gentleman's Sporting Journal, Forest and Stream, and great connections in Washington, ultimately through Theodore Roosevelt, who I contend it was Grinnell who taught Roosevelt to quit being a game hog and start being a conservationist. So why did a man like George Bird Grinnell do what he did? And how did he do it? He did it for, this sounds strange today, why did he get up every day and put his feet on the floor and go out and try to preserve our native species, our wild lands, our crown jewels, our national parks, advocate for and chronicle our Native Americans? He did it because he cared. There was a time in this country when people did things for the obvious reason, because he thought it was the essential responsibility of a man of privilege in the East to put his shoulder to the wheel and try to save the nation. Now, how did he do it? How did he accomplish creating the Boone and Crockett Club? How did he accomplish passing some of the first federal wildlife protection legislation that was the forerunner of the Endangered Species Act? How did he promote the national parks? He did it through pragmatism. He did it, you know, John Muir and Henry David Thoreau they're sainted, you know, high priests of conservation movement, but none of them ever went to Washington and lobbied the Secretary of the Interior, lobbied the White House. Grinnell was the first guy to really figure this out. And when he died in 1938, he was called the father of American conservation. And in the late 1800s in this country, the progressive movement was underway in the East. We were concerned about immigration, incorporation, monopoly, corruption in government. Well, Grinnell, I would come back for his trips in the West, having climbed the glacier and named all the glaciers in Glacier National Park, having figured out the boundaries of Yellowstone, having spent months among Native American tribes, particularly the Blackfeet, Cheyenne. And he realized that conservation should be a part of the American progressive movement. As it is today, conservation was not something separate. And the way progressivism worked in the US was through lobbying, through good government associations. And hence he created the Audubon Society and joined with good people in the East. And that was the birth of the American conservation movement. I would, without taking too much time, I want to read one passage from my book that shows what, well, visionary Grinnell was. And everything that George Bird Grinnell cared about, everything he worried about, everything that alarmed him that was going on in the American West are all the things we are talking about today. And you know, I want my book, you know, I will disappear, but I'm hoping Grinnell will grow some legs and be back part of the conversation that's going on today. And I really want him to be recognized in his place in Montana history, because his fingerprints and footprints are everywhere here. It's really nowhere you can go and not see his impact. He left behind 40 of letters and thousands of pages of handwritten diaries, all of which are still around, and all of which are, if nothing else, chronicle a 50-year chapter in Montana history. Here, though, is a passage that he wrote after one of his trips west in 1879. As I look back on the past 10 years and see what changes have taken place in these glorious mountains since I first knew them, I can form some idea of the transformations which time to come will work in the appearance of the country, its fauna and its flora. The enormous mineral wealth contained in the rock-ribbed hills will be every year more fully developed. Towns will spring up and flourish, and the pure, thin air of the mountains will be blackened and polluted by the smoke vomited from the chimneys of 1,000 smelting furnaces. The game, once so plentiful, will have disappeared with the Indian. Railroads will climb the steep sides of the mountains and wind through the narrow passes, carrying huge loads of provisions to the mining towns. And returning trains will be freighted with ore just dug from the bowels of the earth. The valleys will be filled with fattening cattle, as profitable to the owners as the mines to theirs. Arable land will be taken up and cultivated, and finally the mountains will be stripped of their timbers and will become simply bald and rocky hills. The day when all this shall have taken place is distant, no doubt, and will not be seen by the present generation, but it will come. He wrote that in 1879. I would suggest that in 2020, we all need to get to know George Bird Grinnell a little better, and I'm glad to have had the chance to do that. And I thank the Montana Library Association, the Book Awards, for giving me the opportunity to toot his horn a little more loudly. And congratulations to everyone else. I sure hope to meet all of you sometime. I've known Bryce from when he was a little cub, but we'll get around to seeing you again soon.
Well, I want to thank everybody for getting together today. I think that one of the biggest miracles was that everybody was able to find a time that would work and that we could do this virtually, even though it would have been so much more of a pleasure to have done this in person. I mean, there's just you can't replace, you know, human contact with digital meetings like this, but I think it's just amazing that we were all able to come together today, and I'm so grateful to the Montana Book Festival for giving us a venue and for hosting this for the Montana Book Award Committee. So I should just say that despite COVID-19, the committee is moving ahead, and they are like receiving materials, and they're working to select next year's award winner. So we're still on schedule for that. So there should be another award announcement in spring of 2021. So I thank you all for agreeing to come and do this today. I think it was really special, and I hope that the Montana Book Festival finds that it's something that their attendees really appreciated as well.
On behalf of the Montana Book Festival, I can say yes, 100%. Everyone is going to appreciate this this event and this video. Having been able to be your audience today, I so appreciate the work that you have all done on behalf of Montana. And thank you again. The readings and the conversations and the descriptions, all really wonderful. We're so happy to host you today. To those of you who are going to be watching this video and are watching it right now, you can buy all of these wonderful books at factandfictionbooks.com. Fact and Fiction is our festival bookseller this year. And for those of you who would like to support your Montana Book Festival support and love, you can buy merchandise online at montanabookfestival.com. With that, again, I thank Elizabeth and all of these authors. Congratulations on these awards. You're so appreciated, and thank you for joining us.